That was an amazing part. We'll now open up to the query session. The participants, you can ask your queries or doubts if any. I request all of you to go one at a time, please, to avoid any confusions. Yes, participants.
Yeah, I just have as an Zaha Hadid architect, it's like an inspiration for architects throughout the world. What makes you architects personally think something out of the box? Something it's like a new combination from nature, your innovation, your inspiration. What do you think for the base, or how do you train up yourself so that it will be useful for us to know the facts?
So to be able to think out of the box, you just have to just do it. Basically, you just have to, whatever comes to your mind, like in terms of a concept or a design vision, you just have to start, not be afraid, just sketch it as it is and just try to develop it and stick to it and be truthful to it and not be influenced by anything else. And the fight for it, basically. This is how Zaha started as well. Like she didn't take no for an answer for anything that she thought, even though people were a bit against her in some way, like in terms of design and how to approach things. But at the end, she managed to set up her signature. I think it's very important to have your own signature as well. I mean, not necessarily be too stuck in a box, but have the same kind of language, but at the same time experiment with the different things, find the balance. That's very important. But yeah, that would be my answer. I hope that answered your question.
Yes. Thanks for the clarification.
There was a masterstroke with Zaha Hadid's works when she was there. She used to do everything using a paintbrush. I mean, the concept. But after her demise, what we noticed is there is some loss or connect to Zaha's form dominance. Whatever she proposed, it all dominated in this entire presentations. I mean, presentation means not just presentation, entire proposal. But now it has become more of technical aspects of Zaha Hadid being followed, not as conceptual conceptual ideas. So how do you miss this? How do you
I'm not sure I understood the question. You're saying that there's no more conceptual formation. Is that what you're saying? Or
no, the strokes of Zaha's paintings or Zaha's strokes on building transformation was there when she was there. Now it has become more of technical follow-up of Zaha's ideas rather than conceptual follow-up. Do you miss that connect between Zaha's presence and absence?
I mean, of course, it's highly remarkable the presence and the absence after Zaha passed. But I mean, I joined the company after she passed, so I'm not fully. No, it's fine. I'm very happy to answer as well because that's something I'm curious about too. So I mean, I'm pretty sure before she passed, it was more about like her. She would, as you said, paintbrush a concept, and that would be the driving force of how to develop it. But then now, the times have changed. I think things change all the time. I mean, it's the reality. It's not something we need to escape from. And the way we approach design is a bit more different. But we're trying as much as possible keeping the same language, because at the end of the day, you work at Zaha Hadid, but you need to keep up with the actual language. That's why you joined it. I mean, I'm just speaking from my own personal view. I think that keeping the same language is very important. So, and this is what we're trying as much as possible, but at the same time we're experimenting. So it's opening for a different field, not a field, like a different way of approaching design in our company. So that's something quite interesting and enriching.
She never insisted to one concept like parametrism. She never wanted to be only parametrics. Parametrics was part of her design process.
Yes, of course. It's still the same.
Yes.
That's still the same.
Now it has become more of parametrism as a major theme for ZHA.
I mean, as we mentioned before, like technology is changing fast as well. So we need to keep up with everything. It's just a way of thinking about design that's changing as well. But it doesn't mean the outcome is going to be different. It just means the process is a bit more different, which is absolutely normal because things change, things evolve, things develop in different ways. So yeah, we need to keep going basically.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, one of my friend is asking about scope in doing a master's in digital architecture.
It depends what you're interested in. What's your interest? Like, what would you like to achieve at some point? But I think nowadays it's very important to get into digital. I mean, if you could, that would be great because this is the future. And you can see it now. Like, it's quite relevant in everything that you see. So I think it's very important if you can do it. I would say so. I honestly didn't do it. I was more an old school student. So if I had the chance now, I would definitely do it because that's something very interesting. It's something to immerse yourself in because you'll discover a lot along the way, I think. But you really have to look into what you really want to do, like do your own research into what do you like? Is that something that you like? Then do it. Why not?
In the meanwhile, we have a question from Sheikh. He has asked us about the waffle structure design. So how do they select the material for waffles and stuff? So how do you?
The materials. I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
It depends on sometimes we choose local materials. Sometimes we like, this is what we did in one of the Saudi projects, for example. We chose something very specific to what we had in the actual surrounding. I mean, it depends really on the projects and the needs and the client and the budget as well. So it's so relevant, it's so related to each other. So this is our selection process usually.
All right. Something more about the waffle structure design as well?
It depends on the actual design. Like sometimes, I mean, we have our own code team, so that's a very specific team that actually develops all the shells and all the structural stuff sometimes. I mean, we have as well structural teams, consultants, so that's something we rely on to develop this type of stuff. But we have our own team as well. Sometimes we do our own installations and structural shells, etc. So it's mostly parametric, and they write their own codes as well. So that's a bit more specific. So it's more specific to every project and every team. That's
all right. Cool. I guess she's answered you. We have another question from Aparna. So how do clients generally perceive designs? So how do you manage your clients is the query.
I mean, first, when the clients come over, I mean, they already know what they're in for in terms of the design journey that they're gonna embark on. So that's the first thing. The second thing is it really depends on every project as well. So sometimes things get on hold for a bit. Sometimes get super fast. Like for example, we have this master plan in China called the Unicorn Island. That's one of the most fast-paced projects and the largest project. It's a proper master plan, but it's been like built straight away. So it really depends on the client as well, like the needs and how they want things to be specifically submitted at a specific time. So, and we have some projects where things get a bit on hold, like the client gets a bit delayed for some reason. It all relevant to what they are going through at the same time. So yeah, it's just relative at the end, like everything. So it depends. Like every project is a bit more specific. That's why it's interesting. It's how you get exposed to different stages, like sequentially, like consequentially. So this is what happens.
Hi, Chandal. I have one more question to you.
Hi.
Yeah, it's something like, see, all the projects we listen, what we listen is that all the projects, some kind of R&D has been functioning for the artists used to do for materials, they used to do for R&D. And most of the projects, they're getting a LEED certificate. It's been rated like platinum certified or LEED certified. Is there any kind of research and development department is there? And how do you take all the materials and all the projects to the research and development departments? Like if you're choosing something after designing, you choose materials and you will go back to R&D and you will develop from there, or else you will have some kind of default materials already. It has been done. Okay, fine. We can use in this project. That is what. How do you take it up that?
So first, I'll keep saying it, but it's very relevant. Like, this is how I see it. I think it's dependent on every project and every location at the same time, and the client too. So for example, we did a competition in Saudi. That's another project that I was mentioning before. And we picked a very specific product that's durable, like ceramic tiles for the facade, as I remember. And it was something quite challenging because the client was a bit skeptical about it, like, why would we do that? But then at the same time, it was something very abundant in the city where we were building that project. So we ended up picking a material that's very relevant to the project, at the same time sustainable. But I was gonna say as well that we have our own team in the office too. That's something that's been starting to be built from last year. We have our own sustainable design team. That's something quite new from, I think, the last 2 years we had it. So that's a team that accompanies every project to make sure we have the lead requirements and the actual sustainability criteria is met. So, and that's something that's been accomplished on every project we're doing now. So yeah, so it's quite a process. But we have a dedicated team to actually make sure we have these criteria met for the project. So.
One more thing, no. What you said is, you have been in Saudi. I know, even I saw that project. What is the competition you have done in Saudi? It was quite good. My one more question is, okay, fine. If you are developing a material in one place, like, okay, fine, you are in an R&D sector in London. You're going to develop some kind of material. Where do you manufacture? In Saudi or in London itself?
I mean, it's best to manufacture it in the place where you're actually building it, because that makes a lot of things much easier. But if there's a product that's very specific and we actually need it, which is sometimes it could happen in a project that we've done previously. So if we want something specifically and we cannot find it in the actual place, which is ideal if you can find it in the actual place, then we go to another supplier overseas, basically. It happened a few times, but we're trying to maintain the local production too, like the local workmanship too. So that would be ideal for sustainability. Yeah.
Yeah, I have one more question. No, don't mistake me. I'm asking too much questions to you.
No, go ahead. It's fine.
And see, just I'm being in United Arab Emirates in Dubai. Okay. Here we see one project of Zaha in Sharjah. But here, no, always they prefer like who's an architect, who's a contractor, like that being specific. But in Zaha the projects, no, we couldn't find it. Who's the contractor? If we have own construction team for the Zaha office, so that you'll send your team to here wherever the project goes, or else you'll hire a contractor or in local. So the person is on the local, you'll hire them and you'll make them implement that project here.
Yeah. So, for example, we had this big, the big Saudi project. We have this big station that we won, and I think it's almost completed now. There's one of the biggest stations in Saudi. It's been completed. That's something we've done. We have part of the team that's been working on the full-on projects for the last 6 years, 5 to 6 years, and some of them are being able to go on site. And but at the same time, we have a team from local team who's actually working on it at the same time. So sometimes it could be both. Sometimes it's just we stop at the design stage, like at the development stage, and then someone else takes it on board in terms of on-site, just the execution bit. But it will be ideal if we can, in some of the projects, to carry on being on-site too, just to manage to the coordination and the actual execution get it full on. That will be interesting to see. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
No problem. Thanks.
Well, we have a question wherein they've asked us about, from Venkatesh, where they've asked us about the balance between the traditional and parametric. So something like nowadays we see more parametric dominating, the designs. So how do you view the traditional or the regional designs as well? So how do you take that?
Yeah, I think it's very challenging nowadays. Like this applies to me as well, because I think I'm a bit more traditional than parametric, to be honest, but at the same time, I'm getting more into parametric stuff now. So it's very interesting to get out of your comfort zone and start experimenting new tools. But at the same time, like, I don't know, it's a process. It's a process of thinking about design. So you could completely get out of being traditional. But then again, what is really traditional? It's just sketching and thinking about a concept and drawing plans from sketch. But I mean, this is how we approach architecture from start. But now you see it the other way around. You see things getting more built from form. You start from a form, then you go into the planning, then you start, oh, okay, now you have a project, which is another way of thinking about a project, to be honest. It works as well, but it's just really a preference. Like, how would you really want to like express yourself or go through it into like the design stages? How would you see yourself more comfortable in developing your ideas? So, for example, for me, I always start with a sketch, and then I start developing it. Maybe I take it into I don't know Rhino and start modeling it, and then I then go to CAD, and then I start drawing the plan, and then I do something else. So it's really a personal preference, really. I don't see them completely separated, the traditional and the parametric, but at the same time, you really have to know when to mix the both or when to switch from one to the other, not get into something too far. Like I always say, you should always make sure to find the right balance at the right time, like the connection at the right time. This is where the balance happens, I think.
Cool. So one more. Yes, is anybody asking any question? Any question?
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Good evening. This is Shruti, and I have a question for you.
Hi. Yeah.
So generally, we know that all our buildings reflect some kind of mathematical proportion, considering it's curvy linear in form. Most of them. It's a really challenging. From an architect's point of view, it's challenging to take up a project which involves a lot of math. So, like, how is it related, the math that's involved, how is it related to the concept of the building and also serves the purpose?
You mean, when you say math, you mean like coding and parametricism?
Yes, yes.
Sorry. So how you see it, like, what's your question specifically? Like how you see it developed? How
far-fetched is the relevance of these mathematics that's involved in these buildings and the actual purpose and the concept of the building?
So, I mean, first of all,
okay, sorry.
No, go ahead, please. No, as much as you can develop your question, I can answer.
No, I just wanted to know the train of thought. That's it. Like how, let's just say that there's a concept of fractals. It's a mathematical concept. That's, most of the buildings we can find that. So how do you fix on that topic? Like, it's okay, let's do fractals for this building. Like, how is it relevant to the building that you're going to build? Let's say if you have a particular design, so how is it going to be relevant to that? That's my question.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's one way of looking at it, because at the same time, when you say fractals and mathematics, it's also something very natural, like something you can see naturally and something you can draw it without using. I mean, like you can get inspired without really using mathematic equations, and you can develop a project from there. So this is how I see it. Like if you want to draw a spiral, for example, you can easily do that. You don't need really, I mean, you can, if you want to be very specific into your design and have a very, like a detailed design outcome in terms of like the actual parameters of having a spiral, for example. But I mean, it really helps a lot if you can like develop it mathematically or parametrically, then you get into something more specific. But that's another way of looking at it. And then, I mean, you need to get into, you need to know your tools very well. So this is how you develop that specific idea. So it's just a way of seeing something. So if you're seeing it in terms of like math or an equation or something fractals or something very specific, but at the same time, that's something that's very abundant in as a natural occurrence at the same time. So you could easily do it from a traditional way, or you can do it for a more parametrical and design way. So this is how I see it. So I hope that answers your question. So, I mean, if you really want to go the way into like math and getting more specific, then you need to know your tool very well because it's tool related. It's not really, I mean, purely design related because the tool really like develops the design for you. So this is how.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
All right. So we have another question. So more about your generative art. So because we've seen a lot of them in your profile, and you're more interested in that. So how do you your talk on it and yeah.
How do I? Sorry. How do I what?
We've seen a lot of your generative arts and motion graphics. So your views on it and share your views and.
Oh, my views on
know
it.
something about it. Yeah.
Okay,
what do you want to try to tell your people?
I mean, it's more like it's. I go back to the same thing I always say. Like it's really relative. Like for me, it's something I use to express myself or to experiment the new digital tools that I always explore every day. So I mean, it's really your own personal experience or how you want to develop your designs, and then you start going into the tools and you discover things. That's how I started discovering it. So for me, it's a continuous lane, like it's something that's non-ended yet, but at the same time I am trying to get it more into motion. So I'm coming out of having static generative art into something more motion, maybe getting these arts into something more like a short film, for example, but not in the sense of a short film that you understand, like something more of an experimental, experimental films. I find experimental things more interesting than having a specific topic. Unless you know very well about that topic and you have a message to send, then that's absolutely fine, of course. But for me, I'm more interested in something a bit more experimental because it just opens up a lot of questions. And this is more, I find, enriching because you can start having more discussions instead of having just a single-sided discussion or something very specific, which is absolutely fine at the same time. But for me, for now, this is where I am. I'm starting to get it more into something more motion and having different topics at the same time because it's quite experimental, as I say before.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So I do have a doubt, and I think almost most of the architecture students will have this doubt or expecting this question to rise up. What kind of skills a student should have for them to get selected in such a huge firm like Zaha Hadid Architects? How one could apply there and get a job over there?
I mean, it always depends on the actual demands of the company too. But I mean, as a standard procedure of how to get selected, me myself, I'm not involved in the selection process, obviously. But I know from myself being a candidate once, it's all relevant to the actual requirements at that specific time. But in general, I would say you should definitely know your tools, like your softwares, in terms of Maya, Rhino. Your 3D skills should be at a decent level, at least I would say, and just be very equipped with the current technologies and just like what's happening in the architectural world nowadays, especially parametric design and all the stuff that you see from AA to the Bartlett. So these are platforms to look out for if you're interested into working at Zaha Hadid. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think we'll wind up with the question session.
So thank you so much for the answers. I think you've been, it was really brilliant. And to the others, in case if you have any unanswered queries, you can post them in our feedback form, and I hope Chantal will help us to get you back with the answers. We now have the director and co-founder of Next, architect Prince and architect Robinson. Robinson will now take over.
Okay.
Hello, Chantal.
Hi, Robinson. How are you?
How do you do? Yeah, I'm fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, it's been a great pleasure to be having you here. I need to thank Chantal for being there for us, despite busy schedule. You are actually very cool with us and very, very close to us, actually. Very comfortable person for us. It has been a very interesting session and getting to know more about your design ideologies and the innovative techniques used in the projects as well. And we also got an opportunity to understand the blend of linear formations and what do you mean the digital strata as well, and also passion networks, those generative arts, which are very understandable and also seems to be a continuously changing process too.
Thank you.
Chantal.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope it was like useful, but it was very useful and fun. And yeah, thank you again. It's been quite a pleasure, to be honest. Quite nice. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Hope the session was informative to all the participants as well. A special thanks to all the professors, architects from different countries and the student architects for being a part of this session. It's been a pleasure to have you all here. Very special thanks to all the OFNEX team members as well for their continued effort and support in organizing the session. Hoping to see you all soon in the next interactive session.
And stay connected with OFNEX. We've got more sessions lined up for you. And keep in touch for more updates. And thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.